All right. So we are probably one of my favorite parts to start talking about, only because I've probably spent years on the King James preface. We're going to get into that today. I have to find the slide I left off at. All right. So last week with our review, we talked about Hampton Court. And we talked about the events that led up to Hampton Court, the millenary petition. We even talked about trying to get King James in that right mindset before that, where when he was King of Scotland, they had the Geneva Bible as their official Bible there. And as King of Scotland, they decided to update the Geneva Bible. And the update to that Bible was called the Burnt Island Bible. Now, keeping in mind, because King James was not a big fan of the Geneva Bible, and Scotland had a different church polity. The king didn't decide what the churches used. The churches decided what the churches used. But there still was an effort in Scotland to update the Geneva Bible to what would become the Burnt Island Bible. Then he becomes King of Scotland. I mean, not King of Scotland. He becomes King of England. He has to deal with the conformists, the Puritans, and the avant-garde conformists. He has to deal with these guys. And the conformists, the Puritans send him a letter of all of the complaints that they have with the Church of England, what they want for reform. And then he comes into England, and then the following year, he does Hampton Court. Hampton Court, he's going to address the issues that the Puritans have with the Church of England, among other things, but this is going to be the primary. And on day one, he doesn't even meet with the Puritans. He meets only with the avant-garde conformists. And then day two, he meets with the Puritans, four of them, and John Reynolds being the spokesman for the Puritans. During their back and forth on their issues, it comes up that it comes up that the Book of Common Prayer has multiple translations in it. It references, when it quotes from multiple translations. And the suggestion is made by Reynolds, maybe we should update. He just wants to get the door open to update the Book of Common Prayer. And he's looking for a way in. Okay, he's looking for a way in to update the Book of Common Prayer. As soon as they can agree that the Book of Common Prayer can be updated, maybe then we can get other reforms, is what he's thinking. And so he suggests that the Book of Common Prayer has multiple translations referenced in it, everything from Coverdale, the Great Bible, the Bishop's Bible. All of these Bibles are being quoted in the Book of Common Prayer. And he says, maybe if we just had one uniform translation to update the Book of Common Prayer. He makes that suggestion on day two. Remember, he doesn't like the Geneva Bible, King James. He doesn't like the Geneva Bible. He's already been through an experience once before where the Geneva Bible was updated to the Burnt Island Bible. So this is not beyond his realm of thinking. In fact, it's right in line with his realm of thinking. He does not want the Geneva Bible to usurp the Bishop's Bible, but it's already happened. The people already prefer the Geneva Bible over the Bishop's Bible, but the act of uniformity that prevents them from using it in their church services. They have to use the Bishop's Bible, but they don't like it. And they've already demonstrated that the Bishop's Bible is not as scholarly. It's not as good as what the Geneva Bible was. So on day three, it is decided they are in fact going to update the Bishop's Bible to a new translation, a revision of the Bishop's Bible. And so King James approves this decision. And then he says, but we're going to do it my way. And he has 15 rules for the translators. So the ordinary Bible read in church, commonly called the Bishop's Bible, to be followed and altered as little as the original will permit. So, hey, your base text is the Bishop's Bible. That's what you're starting with. You're going to start with the Bishop's text, the Bishop's Bible as your text, and you're not going to update it unless you have to, okay? Unless you find places to update it, all right? Then he gives the names of the prophets and holy writers and other names in the text to be retained as near as may be according as they are vulgarly used, which is the Latin Vulgate transliterations is what he wants. We talked about that last week. We mentioned like the book or the epistle. I said book last week. I should have been saying the epistle of James and the epistle of Jacob, but you all understood what I meant. And then argument 3, the ecclesiastical words are to be kept as the word church, not to be translated as congregation. That was a shot at Tyndale because that's what Tyndale did, and he disagreed with that decision. When any word has diverse significations, that to be kept, which has most commonly used by the eminent fathers being agreeable to the propriety of the place and the analogies of faith. So when you get to a word and they have multiple senses and you can use these multiple senses to make sense of the verse, use the sense that the church fathers use. Find supporting senses that the church fathers use, choose that sense, and don't choose any sense that would be contrary to the analogies of faith, which would be the doctrines of the Church of England. Division of chapters not to be altered, either not at all or as little as may be, if necessity so require. We talked about that. Don't update the chapter breaks. No marginal notes at all to be fixed, but only for the explanation of Greek and Hebrew words, which cannot, without some circulation, so briefly and fitly expressed in the text. So if you come across a word and you need to explain it further, put it in the margin. You're allowed to do marginal notes for explanation of Greek and Hebrew words. What he doesn't want, because he can't stand the Geneva Bible for its marginal notes, he doesn't want doctrinal notes in the margin. He doesn't want things explaining the interpretation of the text. He just wants words explained, but not necessarily doctrines explained, okay? He doesn't want it to be a study Bible, okay? He doesn't want it to be a study Bible in that sense. All right, and then such quotations of places set down shall serve for fit reference of one scripture to another. You know what else you can put in the margins? Cross-reference. So you have marginal notes for the words and cross-references. That's all he wants to see in the margins. He does not want to see explanations as to why it was okay for the midwives to disobey the Pharaoh. He doesn't want those types of explanations. He doesn't want anything that's going to hurt that could be interpreted as hurting the divine right of kings or any other doctrine for that matter. He's going to leave it to the bishops who are preaching. All right, and then argument 8, 9, and 10, these are all about how the translation will occur. And we talked about that last week. Every particular man of each company is going to take some chapter or chapters and having translated or amended them severally by himself where he thinks good, all meet together to confirm what they have done and agree for their part what shall stand. So do the work and then get together and discuss the work and come to a conclusion as to what it should say there. And then as one company hath dispatched any one book in this manner shall send it to the rest to be considered seriously and judiciously, for his majesty is careful on this point, meaning he's very strict on this point to have everyone examine it. And then if any company upon the review of the books so sent shall doubt or differ upon places, to send them word thereof, to note the places therewithal, to send their reasons, to which, if they consent not, the difference to be compounded at the general meeting, which is to be the chief persons of each company at the end of each work. So if you guys come to a disagreement, mark your disagreements, and then meet together. The chief editors of each company meet together and come to a conclusion. And then number 11, when any special obscurity is doubted, letters are to be directed by authority to send to any learned man in the land for his judgment of such a place. So if you still can't come to a conclusion and you're still not sure what's being said after you've gone through all of these steps, find someone who's specialized in the area, send them a letter, find out what they have to say, and then bring that back to the committee. And then 12, letters to be sent from every bishop to the rest of his clergy, admonishing them of this translation in hand, and move and charge as many as being skillful in tongues have taken pains in that kind to send their particular observations to the company, either at Westminster, Cambridge, or Oxford, according as it was directed before the king's letter to the archbishop. So bishops, go back, tell your clergy that this translation is being undertaken, and if they have special skills in languages, volunteer for the project, be a part of this project. All right, and then number 13, the directors of each company shall be the deans of Westminster, Cambridge, and Chester, Oxford, and then professors of Hebrew and Greek in 2 universities will be there as well. And then, so this is where the oversight is actually going to be done by the deans of the colleges. Okay, this is where you get that sort of parachurch organization that's going to help with the translation. They're going to oversee it. And then these translations to be used when they agree better than the text of the bishop's Bible. All right, so before you come up with your own translation, see if Tyndale, Coverdale, Matthew's Bible, which is Rogers, Whitmer's, which is Cranmer's, and the Geneva Bible. See if they have the word you're looking for. And if they do, use their translation before you start putting new words in. And again, this can only, you still have to follow rules 3 and 4 before you can do that. And then 15, by a later rule, this one was added later. 3 or 4 of the most ancient and grave divines in either of the universities not employed in translating to be assigned to be the overseers of the translation for better observation of the 4th rule, making sure that they have patristic support for their translation choices. That's what that is. All right, and so we looked at the translation committee that was selected. This was, remember, Rule 12, send out letters, find out who has gifting in the languages, let them volunteer. This is the 50, it should be a 54-man list that was originally accepted. I have 57 names up there because some of the lists vary, but 54-man list that was originally accepted. But then a number of these men died before the translation project even started. Some died very early on in the translation process. And so we say, generally speaking, today, the bulk of the KJV was translated by 47 men. Okay? And then as an offsite, because I've heard many different people say different things, that the translation committee was made up of many denominations. That is not the case. The translation committee was made up of one denomination, and that was the Church of England. It was only Church of England bishops and only Church of England priests who were doing the translation for the King James Version. What does that mean? Well, it means that they were agreed on the core doctrines of the Church of England. So things like the sacraments, such as infant baptism, all of these men would have been infant baptizers, and they all would have done infant baptisms, okay? So they would have participated in it. I only say that just to clear the air, that there wasn't some sort of like separatists that were also a part of this. There were no separatists who disagreed with the Church of England who were a part of this translation, which is why I said early on, the separatists have no involvement in this. And that's why we didn't spend any time on them, because we're talking about how we received our Bibles. Separatists aren't a part of it. Not talk about this any further, but the following year after the translation was started, there was an assassination attempt on King James by the Jesuits, the Roman Church, who wanted to reinstate Roman Church rule in the Church of England. And then 1611, we get the completed work of the King James Bible. It's done. It takes them about 7 years to get the work done. I'll just mention it now. If I was going to mention it now, I should have put it up there. Are you all familiar with the Pilcrow symbol? It's in verse by verse Bibles only. Okay, if you have a paragraph Bible, you won't see it in there. But if you have held a King James Bible and it goes verse by verse, every once in a while, you're going to see a verse with a paragraph mark, and it looks like a backwards P with 2 lines. That's called a Pilcrow. Okay, that is a paragraph mark. It's to let you know a new thought is occurring. And they're all over your Bible. But in the book of Acts, I'm bringing it up and I didn't even prepare the notes because this is off the top of my head. But in the book of Acts, roughly halfway through the book of Acts, all the Pilcrows stop. And most have suggested that was because at this point, the King James translators were being rushed to get it to print. They've been working on it for 7 years, and there was some impatience, get it to print. And so the book of Acts never got finished with the Pilcrows, which was usually one of the last things that was added during these editions. Anyway, they probably would have taken longer if they were given the time to go longer. That's the whole reason I'm bringing that up. And then also here, you'll see the title. It's really small for you guys, but the title of these Bibles, we call them Tyndale's Bible, Matthew's Bible, Bishop's Bible, Geneva Bible, Great Bible. These are all actually kind of like nicknames for these Bibles that weren't originally given those names, including the King James Bible itself was not originally given that name, nor the Authorized Version. Those are all later attributions that we give them now, because the titles are actually quite long and they're all super similar. And so they would be difficult to remember which one's which. So the title of the Bible here is the Holy Bible, containing the Old and New, containing the Old Testament and the New, newly translated out of the original tongues, and with the former translations diligently compared and reused by His Majesty's special commandment, appointed to be read in churches. That was the name of the Bible. All right. And all of the Bibles during that time, they had very long names like this. Now, the last two lines, the Majesty's special commandment, shows that it was done by the king's decree. And then the other one was, it's appointed to be read in churches as a part of the Uniformity Act, right? Read the translation that's been authorized. And that's how it gets the name, the Authorized Version, because it's authorized by King James to be read in the Church of England churches. I say this because I find it comical, for lack of a better word, when someone would stand in the pulpit. I come from a Baptist background. When someone, particularly an independent Baptist, would stand in the pulpit and talk about his authorized version, and I would say, authorized by who and for what? Authorized by a king you don't acknowledge, neither as an American, because he's the King of England, nor as an independent Baptist. You don't acknowledge his authority. And it's to be read in churches, which he would not recognize your church. He didn't appoint it to be read in Baptist churches. He appointed it to be read in Church of England churches. So you'll never hear me call it the Authorized Version, because I don't care about the man who authorized it. He is not an authority over me. I will call it the King James Bible and the King James Version because I believe those are appropriate, but it's not authorized for me or by someone whose authority I recognize. So that's just one of my own things. It's a little pet peeve of mine when I hear people call it the Authorized Version. Unless you're in the Church of England, it is not authorized for you. And it was not authorized by someone whose authority you actually acknowledge, okay? I don't acknowledge the authority of the King of England or the Church of England, okay? So that's that. So we'll call it the King James Bible moving forward, or the King James Version. Now, speaking of that, King James Bible versus King James Version. I grew up in like I said, a King James only background, and it was often called the King James Bible because they didn't like it called the King James Version. So they would say, no, all the other ones are versions. This is the only Bible, okay? And so when you would talk about the New American Standard Bible, the NASB, they would call it the New American Standard Version. They would take the Bible out and put in version. Interestingly enough, I actually grew, I grew contentious towards people who would use King James Bible because it says KJV right on the spine of it. And so I'm like, just call it what it is. But going through the history of this, I learned that it was originally called the King James Bible, which was just like the Geneva Bible and the Bishop's Bible and the Tyndale Bible. All of these were called Bible during this time. And so it was originally called the King James Bible. So then I was like, well, how did we come to KJV? Because now it's King James Version. It's not KJV. Well, what happened was over history, over time, as these things occur, you had the Bible have two names, the Authorized Version and the King James Bible. And those two names eventually merged together to become the King James Version. And that becomes the name that gets copyrighted and used by Cambridge later on. And so that's how we got the name King James Version. So if I say King James Bible or King James Version, I'm referring to the same Bible, different time periods for its name. All right, so, okay, now that being said, we're going to look at portions of the preface. I'm not going to read the whole preface to you because the preface, depending on the font size and the page size of your Bible, is about 28 pages long. It is one of the largest prefaces of any of the Bibles we've talked about thus far. And I also think it is possibly one of the best prefaces ever written in the front of any Bible to date. Whether there are some really good prefaces out there, but I just don't think any come to the same level of majesty that the King James translators did on their preface. I also think that the preface is timeless because their preface is dealing with issues of their day and they're answering it with issues through history. And so if you're not paying attention to history, then you're doomed to repeat history, right? And so they're going to deal with issues that are being raised against them and their translation. Their preface is a defense of the work that they're doing. That's what it is. And so we're going to talk about that. Yeah, it handles so many issues of translation philosophy, onlyism, and slander, and so many things. And so we're gonna talk about that. All right. Oh, and I want to say this too. If you have a King James Bible that does not have the preface, the translators to the reader, you need to get, or you need to find it online. We'll talk about how you can find it online for free. But I think every King James Bible should have the translators to the reader in the front of it. I don't like that publishers remove it. It is so pertinent for today's issues, and it was pertinent back then. It should be retained. In fact, I like it so much, I wish it was on the front of every Bible, regardless of translation, because it handles so many issues of even translation disagreements and philosophy and things of that nature. So we'll cover that. All right. So the KJV translators followed a custom that is well established during the Reformation. Before addressing the reader, they addressed the ruling authority. So the Great Bible, if you read its preface, they first address Henry VIII. Erasmus, when you look at his Greek New Testaments, he first addresses the Pope. Okay. In fact, remember we used that as he commended his Greek New Testament to the Pope because he was going to print without papal approval, and this was dangerous. And so he dedicated it to the Pope with many flattering words to the Pope, hoping to get the Pope to side with him and allow his Greek New Testament to be published. It works. The Pope not only approves it, he commends it. And then the Erasmus removes his initial preface and replaces it with the Pope's commendation. Just to be like, I'm safe here, guys. I'm okay now. Because he doesn't want to get burned at the stake like some other people who tried to do what he did happens. The Geneva Bible and the Bishop's Bible, they both address Queen Elizabeth. And so the King James Bible is first going to address King James as the defender of faith, sent by God the Father Almighty, and they have many flattering words for him. And here they commend the translation to him. And it's a 1 page, well, 1.5 page, I should say. It's about 1.5 pages long, their commendation of the translation to King James. Okay, so that's the I can't say it. That's the dedication to King James. The part of the preface, and that's in some KJV Bibles. The real preface, the one that I'm most interested in, is the one that's to us, the reader. The translators to the reader in 1611. This is the long preface. This is the one that's about 28 pages long. And so I recommend, I don't care if you use the King James Bible or not, but if you've never read the preface to the King James Bible, you ought to, because it is so well done. And okay, you can cheat a little bit because we're going to go through the preface in this class, so you don't have to read it, but I'm not covering every line. And I think you should read every line. So, but I will say this, the preface to the King James, if you think the King James translation is hard to read, like if you find it difficult, the preface is way harder. Okay. And so when I first started working through the preface, I was really hoping someone would come along or had come along and kind of modernized it and made it easier to read. And so I went searching on the internet for modern editions. The first thing I looked for was just modern spelling, because the original spelling is very different. And I did find editions of modern spelling, so that was helpful. Then I wanted modern verbiage. For example, the very first line, the header, is the best things have been calumniated. And I was like, who here knows what calumniated means? Anybody? Nobody? Nobody here knows what calumniated means. That's okay. I didn't either. I had to look it up. But before I looked it up, this is the kind of issue I was running into throughout the entire preface, that I was finding words that not only did I not know the meaning of, I'd never even heard of them. And so I went and I found this website. Oh man, that is really tiny. I was hoping it was bigger. That's okay. I'm going to zoom in on it for you anyway. But this is a full online version in which they seemingly attempt to update it into somewhat more modern English. But this is a KJV only website. And what you can't see here is, so it's called Coming in the Clouds. And then the next article, if you were to click here, says which Bible verses did the NIV delete? Okay. And then this one back here says, let me see, I got to actually read it. Oh, okay. The eye opener, 200 Bible verses changed. Okay. That's the article side by side with the article on the preface. And so I was on here and I said, okay, it looks like they might have updated it a little bit. And so remember, the first line is, here we go, the best things have been calumniated. That's the first line. Their first line is the best things have been culminated. Now, culminated, I know. I've heard that word. The best things have been brought together. Okay, that's what they're suggesting that the first line of the preface means. And so they're saying, hey, the best things have been brought together. That's an interesting defense, kicking off the KJV preface. The best things have been brought together. Skipping ahead, the second header, these are headers now. The highest personages have been culminated. The highest personages have been brought together. Okay, and then they produce the text under the second heading. Oh, sorry, this is actually, let me see. Okay, the third heading, they skip. I don't know why, but they actually didn't use the third heading. The third heading is the best thing. Let's see. Yeah, this is the heading that they didn't write. Now I'm getting confused. Sorry. They didn't write the second heading. That's what it was. I don't have the second heading up here for you. They didn't write the second heading. They skipped it for some reason, which would have been the highest personages have been calumniated, according to the KJV. This is what it is. The highest persons have been calumniated. If they had repeated their mistake, it would have been the highest persons have been culminated. The third one is the highest, the majesty's, come on, where's my cursor here? There we go. His Majesty's constancy, notwithstanding calumniation for the survey of English translations, reads, His Majesty's constancy, come on, cursor. I don't know why my cursor doesn't want to agree with me right now. It is being very slow. There we go. Okay. His Majesty's constancy, notwithstanding culmination for the survey of the English translations. Calumniation does not mean culmination. They're entirely different words and they have nothing to do with each other. So we'll come back to it. So I say all of this to say, be careful where you pull the King James preface online, because a number of people have made a number of mistakes, including King James onlyists who are supposed to understand this stuff better than me, tend to write mistakes into the preface. So if you, before I get to what the word calumniation means, we'll get there. If you want a verbatim, word for word, updated spelling, but still word for word preface of the King James Bible, Blue Letter Bible provides it. So Blue Letter Bible has the, oh man, I am not getting my, there we go. Blue Letter Bible has the King James preface in it. So you can go to blueletterbible.com or you can go to the app. And Blue Letter Bible has the best things have been calumniated, okay? And they provide all of the text. They did not update the wording of the text at all, just the spelling, okay? So if you want the original, you want to read it that way, that's fine. However, if you want an updated, more modern English rendering of the preface, which I did, I got this book called The Forgotten Preface by Joshua Barzon. If you want to get it on Amazon, it's $7 when I wrote this, okay? $7 on Amazon. Or you can get the Kindle version for $3. So very inexpensive. And if you really, really, really want the preface, but you don't have $7 to spend on it, The Forgotten Preface, I will give you my copy because I think it's that good. So you can come and ask me for it, and I will either buy you your own copy or I will give you my copy. This is probably the one book largely because it's inexpensive, but this is probably the one book I have given out more than any other book is The Forgotten Preface. Yeah, probably 24 times. Almost every time someone came to my house and we had a discussion about the King James Bible, I gave them this book before they left. So I've given it away many times. So for the rest of this class, as I quote from the preface, I'm going to quote from Josh Barzon's updated English. It's been vetted. I have not heard even a King James onlyist come out and say that he got a translation or he misinterpreted it. They do argue that he shouldn't have updated at all, but they don't give any point of contention where his update means something other than what the King James translators had in theirs. So that was part of my vetting to see if anyone raised any actual concerns with the project that he did, and I can't find any. So if you do open the Forgotten Preface and you do go to the very first line, and it says, the best things have been calumniated, Josh Barzon updates that to the best things have been defamed. Another way of saying that would be slandered. The best things have been defamed or slandered. And that's what it means to be calumniated. It is not culminated to be brought together. It is slandered or defamed. Okay. And so the King James preface can be broken down into about 3 different sections. Okay. It's a long preface. We're going to go through it section by section, but I'm not going to go through it line by line. We're just going to cover each section. All right. So the first 3 sections are about slander, slandering the people involved with the work. All right. That will have to do with King James and the King James translators. That's the first 3 sections. The next 9 sections are their arguments. Now, Miles Smith is who's up here. So Miles Smith is the King James translator who also wrote the preface on behalf of the translation team. So throughout the entire thing, he's writing we, because he's writing it on behalf of the translation team. Okay. So the next 9 headings are their arguments against onlyism or textual absolutism. Maybe I'll bring that up next week, but onlyism and textual absolutism are synonymous. It means our text is the perfect text. Okay. The next 9 headings are going to be against this. And why would they be against this? Why are they bringing this up? Because if you remember, we just had a version of the Roman Church Bible that was just released not long before this, the Douay-Rheims Bible. And they had 10 arguments in it for Latin Vulgate onlyism. They're going to have 9 arguments opposing the 10 arguments of Latin Vulgate onlyism. So the next 9 arguments are going to be against onlyism. And then the last 3 headings are about how they went about updating the Bishop's Bible specifically, including their translation philosophy. So we talked about translation philosophy with the Geneva Bible, where they said, hey, We're attempting to be very word for word. We're going to put in italics words that just couldn't be word for word. We're going to do this sort of work. The King James translators are going to have their own section on translation philosophy. Interestingly enough, they never mention italics, though they used them, just like the Geneva Bible did. So this is the basic structure of the preface, and we're only going to kind of overview each section. I'm not going to read the entirety of each section, and but I do highly recommend that you work through the preface on your own as you're in your own reading. So section 1, the best things have been defamed. Like I said, I think this preface is good enough that we can use it today, and it will help us evaluate even how we evaluate Bibles today, other than the King James. It is so good that I think it is a good foundation by which you can use to evaluate other translations. That's how timely I think it is. So 2 things to note off the bat. The King James translators are receiving opposition to the translation before they ever even publish it. Okay, they hadn't even published it yet. Just people know it's in the works. Obviously, letters were sent out, so it's public knowledge that this project is going to occur. And the Puritans and the Roman Church, the Puritans, the Separatists, and the Roman Church have their issues. They aren't excited about this. Even though John Reynolds asked for this sort of thing, the Puritans are actually opposing it. And so we'll talk about that when we get there. But Separatists, Puritans, and the Roman Church have a problem with this occurring. They already had a Bible they loved for the Puritans and the Separatists. They love the Geneva Bible, and the Douay-Rheims had come out. It hasn't gotten papal approval yet, but the Roman Church is not a fan of vernacular translations altogether. So we'll talk about that. So the best things have been defamed. This is the section I decided to pull from that, which is actually the very first section of the section. It says, zeal to promote the common good, whether by devising anything ourselves or by revising the work of others, certainly deserves much respect and esteem. But in this world, it is coldly welcomed. It is greeted with suspicion instead of love, and with envy instead of thanks. If anything could be misunderstood, some critic will ensure that it will be misunderstood and thus be in danger of being condemned. Everyone who has gone through the experience of promoting new things will affirm this. Was there ever any project that involved something new or a renewal that did not endure many a storm of protest and opposition? So right off the bat, they're saying, hey, we're going to address some issues based on the opening acknowledges that there is suspicion of their work. They couch it with their heart. They are zealous of wanting to promote the common good by bringing a new translation, which is just a revision of an older translation. They say this type of work should be respected and esteemed, but instead it is coldly welcomed. It should be greeted with love, but instead it is greeted with suspicion. We should be thankful for it, but instead we are envious. They go on to say that if any part of the translation could be misunderstood, some critic will guarantee that it is misunderstood and attempt to have the work condemned. Then they appeal to history, and they make claims that everyone who introduces new things that have a net benefit for people will affirm that this is the case. You can look at this today. Look at AI coming out. It could have a net benefit for people. It's had a net benefit for me, but there will be condemnation of it. There was condemnation of the internet, condemnation of the printing press, condemnation of machinery altogether, condemnation of you name it. Look at an innovation throughout history that has benefited us today. There was always a group of people who said, no, this is going to hurt. There's always dangers. We can acknowledge that. But this is what they said. There will always be protest to anything that comes out to help people that is a renewal or even something new. So the rest of the section under this basically tracks through history of the thing I just did for you. I just used more modern examples. They use the examples that they had, and they go through history, just demonstrating the new things that came out that received a lot of opposition. And like I said, this preface is truly timeless. So how would we see this in our day when it comes to translating? Well, when it comes to the work of translating the Bible, whether it is a new translation or a revision of the earlier work, our general attitude towards this work should be respect for the people who are doing it. When we have a new translation or a revision, the grounding heart we should have is respect the people doing the work. A second, we should read it with love and thanks. That should be the second one. And the third, we should be charitable. We should not go out of our way to misunderstand the product that they produce. We should attempt to be charitable and try to understand why they made the decisions they made. Instead of attempting to misunderstand it, we should try to understand it. Okay? And so this is huge. This is huge for people today. I'm not even speaking to King James onlyists. I see this happen all the time. I've brought it up before, but the ESV just came out with a revision, and the amount of people who intentionally misunderstood certain changes because they did not want to see the ESV updated. They greeted it with suspicion instead of thankfulness. They were suspicious. They were not doing it with love, and they were certainly not charitable. Happens all the time. That should not be our general attitude. When a bad translation comes out, because they can and they do, we should acknowledge it as such. But that shouldn't be our mindset going in. Our mindset going in should be thankfulness, love, charity, and respect. That should be our mindset going in. All right, so the second one, we'll probably tackle this one and then we'll quit for today. The highest personages have been defamed or slandered. Descending to later times, we find many examples of this kind of unkind reaction. That's what they're saying. Descending to later times, we find many examples of this kind of unkind reaction. The first christened emperor, Constantine, at least the first emperor who openly professed the faith and allowed others to do likewise, used his resources to strengthen the empire and to provide for the church. And because of this, he was given the name Publius, or one might say wasteful prince, the sort of name given to one who needs a guardian or overseer. This is the treatment that has been given to excellent kings in former times. Then they give a Latin phrase and translate it, regarding their good deeds, evil is spoken. Nor is there any likelihood that envy and maliciousness died when they were buried with the ancient. So here they have a shift away from the product. Okay, so before we talked about the product, okay, now they're going to talk about the people who are essentially overseeing or doing the work. Okay, so in this case, they're using Constantine. So the people who have the power to make this happen. So not only the products have been slandered, but the people who are part of producing the products are going to be slandered. And so they use historical figures to back up this claim. And yeah, so I shared this quote particularly, one on Constantine. They mention a number of people. Most of them aren't familiar to most people. And so the Constantine one is the one that's most familiar. But Constantine was an emperor who made Christianity legal in the Roman Empire. And everything from bad doctrine to there's 100 things that Constantine is attributed with that have nothing to do with him. For example, they say the Trinity came about because of Constantine. That's the atheists attacking the Trinity because of Constantine. And then I see other bad doctrines from fundamentalists who say that Constantine encouraged certain bad doctrines, even though he had nothing to do with it. What he did was he made Christianity legal and he helped provide finances to the church. And so Constantine gets slandered by both sides. Now, I'm not saying Constantine was perfect in all of his ways. There are things I disagree with Constantine on. The point is not to slander them, not to attribute falsehoods to them because of the disagreements you have with them. So in essence, the King James translators are using Constantine as an example to illustrate that even a powerful and benevolent ruler like him, who dedicated resources to the Christian church, was not immune to being slandered and given a demeaning nickname, Publius, or wasteful prince by those who disapproved of his action, and that the people of today are not any different. So the King James translators are saying it's not any different today during the Reformation than the people who did this in the past. And so today we should give praise to where praise is due. And we should, when people help advance the Christian cause and the cause of Christ, we should praise them for that, even if there are other places where we disagree with them, not to slander them because we disagree with them. So keep your categories straight. Be willing to say they're wrong over here. Be willing to say they're right over here. Don't slander them overall for everything because they're wrong over here. All right. So be charitable. Yeah, I've heard this, that the modern text critics and the modern translators are doing the work of Satan. They're attributing the work of the Holy Ghost to the work of Satan. We shouldn't do that. And if you want to see how Jesus responds to that, your homework this week, on top of getting a copy of the King James preface, read Luke 9:49 through 56. All right. We will pick up next week with the third section. Hopefully, maybe next week, maybe we can finish the preface. I probably have too high hopes for that, but we're going to try and get through the preface kind of quickly. And you all are dismissed. Thank you.